Mr. Doherty. Mr. Mackey.
Yeah.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would everybody please stand for the invocation, the pledge? I need a volunteer for the invocation. Mr. Matthews and Ms. Qureshi, would you please start us in the pledge after? Bill?
Dear Lord, we come to the parish's meetings tonight. We ask that you guide us in our decisions and give us the wisdom of your guidance for our meeting. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the commissioners had an opportunity to look at the February 14th minutes, and are there any corrections or changes?
I went through it, and the mail out to us had left out an item, but Ms. Davis has it corrected now, so that's the only thing I saw wrong, so I make the motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve. I have a second by Mr. Doherty. Please vote on the motion. Motion carries. 6 yes. Mr. Keller, any cases we know are asking to be tabled or withdrawn?
No, sir.
On the consent calendar, are there any items that any of the commissioners would like to pull? Mr. Matthews?
Yes, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5.
Mr. Chairman, I also need to have minor subdivision 12-02004 pulled also because it needs waivers.
Okay.
And one other thing, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure whether these need to be pulled or not, but the last 5 items, are we going to be sending a letter to the developer asking them to give us an explanation as to why they need the time? Would you please do that and ask them to come to the next meeting?
Yeah, this is just their 60-day notice, but we'll
Yeah, but I
notify
want-
them that you want an explanation of
Yes, we want an explanation of the time, why it's taking us long.
Mr. Shane.
If I may, in that regard, perhaps not all 5 of them, and I assume you're referring to the last 5?
Yes, the
last one
Audrey
being-
Heights down to entering the parish right away.
Yes, I believe that with regard to Alton subdivision, the report that you have from engineering in your package suggests that all obligations have been satisfied, that the performance bond should be released upon the posting of a maintenance bond. So I
Okay.
don't think it would be appropriate to call it. I just didn't want it to
Okay.
fall into the vat where it needs to come back before you next
Okay.
month.
Then do we need to call that one also?
Pull that one.
No, sir.
Not call, but pull.
We'll
Long-term
pull it
housing.
so
No,
we
I
can-
wouldn't think it would need, well, I'd leave it to Mr. Hall, but I don't think it would need to be pulled. I think that you could, by consent, approve the recommendation of engineering, which says that when the maintenance bond's put up, the performance
That we
bond
need
can
to-
be
okay.
released.
Then, the
If
last
that's what their
5, with the exception of the
recommendation is.
Alton subdivision, would you please send a letter to them?
Okay, we're gonna pull Colonial Pinnacle Nordilac subdivision, Autumn Creek subdivision, Phase 1, Autumn Creek Phase 2, Wadsworth subdivision, and minor subdivision review MS 12-02-004.
No, not Wadsworth. I don't want to pull that one. I want to pull
You said
Colonial,
Which
Autumn Creek, 1 and 2, and, I'm sorry, and the villages of Normandy Oaks.
Okay,
Mr. Lombard?
Yes, sir.
I apologize. I stand corrected. The matter I was referring to does involve Alton, but it's the 4th item and not the 3rd from the bottom. So if you feel you need to call the 3rd from the, or put it on the notice, that would be appropriate. Mr. Shane will go sit down and keep his mouth shut.
we will pull Colonial Pinnacle Nordilac subdivision, Autumn Creek Phase 1, Autumn Creek Phase 2, Town of Alton subdivision, and the village of Normandy Oaks. I'll need a motion to pull,
Go ahead,
and also
Mr. Chairman.
minor subdivision 12-02-004.
Wait,
Mr.
wait,
Chairman.
hold.
I
Is
had
the
a,
town of Alton subdivision the one we want to pull or not? That's the one we don't need to pull. Number 4, we do not need to pull. It's the Alton subdivision, 13th Street extension.
Okay. We'll pull Alton subdivision, 13th Street extension, not item 4, Town of Alton. So I'll need a motion to pull those.
So moved.
I have a motion, I have a second. Please vote on that motion. Motion carries. On the rest of, anybody in the public would like any item pulled on the consent calendar? Okay. Anybody in the public have any objections to any of the items we're going to pass on the consent calendar? Okay, on the consent calendar, I'll need a motion to approve the rest of them according to staff recommendations. I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. Matthews. Please vote on that motion. Motion carries. Okay, the first item, Colonial Pinnacle Nordalac subdivision, Ward 1, District 1, in the amount of $1,140,000. It expires April 12th of 2012. The debtor is Colonial Pinnacle Nordalac JV LLC, and it's in Mr. Dean's district. Any opposition? Staff, your comments.
The above referenced performance obligation expires April 12th, 2012, and is scheduled for review by the Planning Commission at the March 13th meeting. The work covered by this obligation has not been accomplished. The following uncompleted items exist: asphalt pavement for the access drives, concrete curbs and gutters, additional pond excavation. The performance obligation was established by the Planning Commission on September 14th, 2010, and has been extended in six-month increments since that date. The developer or petitioner will be advised he will be required to conform with all current ordinances when applicable as a condition of this extension. The developer or petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on January 12th, 2012, to appear at the March 13th, 2012 meeting to explain in detail why an extension of time is needed. The developer or petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on 2/2012 to submit a letter explaining in detail why an extension of time is needed for this obligation. We have not received a response letter. Therefore, it is recommended by the performance obligation that the performance obligation be extended for a period of 6 months or until work is satisfactorily accomplished.
Yes, sir, and your name is?
Kenneth Marshall with Colonial Properties Trust, the developer.
Yes, sir. And you have something to add to?
I'm here to
I see
answer
we
any
got a-
questions you have about our project. I
Yeah,
can
all right.
give you a little background if
We
you'd
were given a
like.
letter this evening from Colonial Pinnacle telling us what's finished and what's not finished.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Keller's had a chance to pass out the,
Yes, sir, that's the one
Okay.
we have.
I think probably the best thing to look at is the 4th page on what has been passed out. As you know, or as many of you may know, our project began construction in 2008. It was intended to be a significant regional retail project. The downturn in the economy, I would say, severely hampered our efforts to move that project along in a timely manner, although we have, starting in 2010, we were able to start construction on what we consider to be Phase 1 of the project, which is about 300,000 square feet. In conjunction with that, we completed our work on Pinnacle Parkway, which is a public road, as you know, and also West Shore Drive, which goes to the northern boundary of our site. We've also completed retention ponds that service the portions of the project that are complete, as well as providing temporary stormwater drainage functionality for the areas that are graded. We've completed, in green, you can see on the map that you've got, we've completed the internal driveway structure such that it services all of the portions of the project that are activated, if you will, as part of our Phase 1 project. We've installed 2 traffic signals, one that is operational in part of our Phase 1 project, and one that is currently not operational but ready to go when we commence development of the western part of our project. We continue to work very hard to move this project forward. We have a lot invested in the project. We respectfully request that you extend our obligation time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshall. Let me turn it over to the commissioners. Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Marshall, you here? Okay. Mr. Marshall, the main reason we've been started to do this is we've had a lot of projects that appear that are just laying there with nothing being done. It appears to me that Colonial Pinnacle, in fact, is working on their project and is not letting it sit fallow. But you were the first of the ones that came before us. I would move to grant the extension as requested.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Davis, any other comments?
Just that I appreciate Mr. Marshall coming out and explaining this to us more thoroughly, and especially with this information and the 6 bullet points that you made. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please vote on the motion. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you.
Autumn Creek Phase 1 subdivision, Ward 1, District 1, the amount of $5,000, expires April 27th of 2012. The debtor is Autumn Creek Development LLC, and it's in Mr. Dean's district. Any opposition? Staff, your comments.
Autumn Creek subdivision Phase 1. The above referenced performance obligation expires April 27, 2012, and is scheduled for review by the Planning Commission at the March 13th meeting. The work covered by this obligation has not been accomplished. The following uncompleted items exist. Permanent turnaround needs to be constructed. The performance obligation was established by the Planning Commission on October 9, 2007, and has been extended for 6-month increments since this date. The developer petition will be advised that he will be required to conform with all current ordinances when applicable as a condition of this extension. The developer or petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on January 12th to appear at the March 13th meeting to explain in detail why the extension of time is needed. The developer or petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on 2/2012 to submit a letter explaining in detail why an extension of time is needed for this obligation. No response letter was received, therefore it is recommended by the performance that the performance obligation be extended for a period of 6 months or until the work is satisfactorily accomplished.
Mr. Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Lombard. Paul Marone on behalf of Autumn Creek Development. The outstanding item that is the subject of the performance obligation is actually a connection from Phase 1 of Autumn Creek subdivision into what will be a developed commercial parcel between Phase 1 and Highway 22. This project, as some of you may recall, was approved as a PUD back several years ago. It did have the commercial component out front, and at that time, there was no connection because there was nothing to connect into, which gave rise to the need for this obligation to be established. With the economic climate that has pushed off that commercial development even further. As a result of that and the Commission's concerns about these type matters lingering, we took the opportunity to meet with your staff last week. And in fact, on this item, you will have a request from us before you next month where we will be asking for relief from the need to make that connection, ultimately just to end that roadway where it is now. Based on your decision at that hearing next month, we'll be prepared to take the action that's necessary. What has transpired since 2007 when Phase 1 was constructed, obviously, is that Phase 1 is now built out just about. And the residents are concerned about a future connection to that commercial parcel and have really urged the developer to come in and request that that connection not be made. So that item will be before you next month, where you'll have an opportunity to look at that map and hear our position on that, and then ultimately make a decision which will prompt us to take the necessary action from there. But I see this matter being concluded one way or the other within the next month or two at the latest.
I can tell you I talked to Mr. Delahousie this evening since he's not here, and he explained the same thing that Mr. Marone just said. And evidently, the homeowners association would not like to have a cul-de-sac back there. They would like to have it barricaded off so nobody can access it, and just so they can back up and turn around and come back out. They're against the cul-de-sac, from what he's telling me, and Mr. Dean, I think, agrees with him, so we'll
That's,
see it
that's
next
correct.
month.
But is that part of the parish's method of dealing with these streets, to just end them? I thought we had to have some turnaround there.
There is the current ordinance requires, if there are 3 lots, that once you get that 3rd lot, it requires a turnaround unless a waiver is granted. This is actually 3 lots. And then it would, again, it wouldn't have been a cul-de-sac, it would have extended into, it had been a connection into the commercial, which would have ultimately gone to 22. So it does require a waiver, which requires our request, which is going to be before you for consideration next month.
Okay, considering that this is going to come before us next month, according to Mr. Morone, and I believe Mr. Morone, what type of action should we take, Neil? Can we table it? What can we do?
I would just go ahead and extend it and hear it next month and make a decision next month whether you
Just extend it with the assumption that it will in fact be heard next month? Okay.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, will these 3 lots need service, such as garbage pickup and stuff, and how will they be able to turn around and back up? And I'm just saying, you know, that's
Right.
one of the things we have to look at.
Right,
Before
and-
just automatically giving you a waiver for something that they can't properly
Right.
move a
Hear it
vehicle in.
next month.
And that we'll be able to provide you with a map that'll give you an idea, and you
So
can see
this will be
that.
the last extension for this.
That's correct.
I make a motion to approve.
Got a motion, I got a second. Any discussion? Please vote on the motion. Motion carries. Autumn Creek Phase 2 subdivision, Ward 1, District 1, in the amount of $10,000 that expires April 27th of 2012. The debtor is Autumn Creek Development LLC, and it's in Mr. Dean's district. Any opposition? Staff, your comments.
The above reference performance obligation expires April 27, 2012, and is scheduled for review by the Planning Commission at the March 13, 2012 meeting. The work covered by this obligation has not been accomplished. Following uncompleted items exist. Construct asphalt cul-de-sac at the end of Foliage Court and Autumn Creek Drive. The performance obligation was established by the Planning Commission on the March 5, 2009 meeting and has been extended for 6-month increments since that date. The developer petitioner will be advised he will be required to conform with all current ordinances when applicable as a condition of this extension. The developer petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on January 12, 2012, to appear at the March 13, 2012 meeting to explain in detail why an extension of time is needed. The developer petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on 2/2012 to submit a letter explaining in detail why an extension of time is needed for this obligation. We received a letter. Therefore, it is recommended that the performance obligation be extended for a period of 6 months or until work is satisfactorily completed.
Mr. Morone.
Thank you, Mr. Lombard. Again, Paul Marone on behalf of Autumn Creek Development LLC. Same subdivision, second phase, 2 issues this time. The first issue, perhaps the larger issue, was the required cul-de-sac at the end of Foliage Court. You all might recall that when this phase was approved, by that time, Autumn Creek 2 had submitted for zoning, was coming down the pike, and there was going to be a connection between this subdivision and that subdivision through this planned cul-de-sac. You may also recall that or through the course of the next several years, for a variety of reasons, just recently, that connection was severed, and the decision was made that they would not connect. The reason the cul-de-sac had not been constructed was because there wasn't going to ultimately be a cul-de-sac, there was going to be the connection. Now the connection is gone, the cul-de-sac has been constructed, and hopefully that issue is resolved, save perhaps a few minor punch list items that your staff needs. But the construction is done, perhaps some dressing of shoulders, and that item is completed. The other issue, the second issue, is at the end of Autumn Creek Drive. This issue is very similar to the issue that I just mentioned with regards to Phase 1. On the final plan and the preliminary plan for Phase 2, at the end of Autumn Creek Drive, at the far north end of the subdivision, the plans depicted what I would describe to you as a hammerhead turnaround. Not a cul-de-sac, but basically at the very end, the right-of-way area outside of the street would have been paved to allow for some maneuvering to turn around in that area, because, again, we have a turn on Foliage Court, and there are 3 lots, just as I mentioned before. There is one home constructed at the very north end in this area, and there's another under construction. To construct that turnaround in that manner would impede their driveways on those 2 end homes. So next month, again, after meeting with your staff and looking at what would be the best way to handle this, it was agreed that we would submit again for a waiver on this item, and that we would be submitting to you letters from those lot owners identifying that their driveways are there, that they would prefer, as opposed to tearing up their driveway or encumbering their driveways with additional work within that right-of-way, that those driveways simply be used and that a waiver be granted. That item will be before you next month. Once you make a determination on that item, then that will clear our way to take whatever actions necessary, if any, to resolve this item. But like Phase 1, I view this item being completed one way or the other in the next 30 to 60 days after your hearing next month.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, I have one concern. The letter that was mailed March 2nd from Mr. Pagoda clearly states that the cul-de-sacs at the end of Foliage Court and Autumn Green Drive were complete. Then, on March 5th, March 3rd, this office went out and looked at those cul-de-sacs and states that Autumn Green Drive is not constructed. So, a little concerned. Does that mean the letter that was mailed to the planning department was incorrect?
The March 2nd letter of Mr. Pagoda is incorrect insofar as it relates to the end of Autumn Creek Drive.
So
That's
it's
correct.
just the Foliage Court?
Foliage Court is
Okay, I'm just a little
correct.
concerned on why he would mention
Yeah.
both when both weren't completed.
I think that was in error. I'm not sure exactly why that happened, but again, it was an error.
Okay.
Mr. Matthews?
Well, that had concerned me also, that we're getting letters from engineers now that we maybe can't rely on, which is a little unnerving. But the Foliage Court, you said that there's basically just a punch list that needs to be completed?
Yes, my
Is that
understanding
correct?
from a meeting that took place last week was just that there needed to be some dressing around the shoulders. And I understand that has now been completed, so we believe that everything is done. If there is anything lacking, it should be minor touch-up, which we're prepared to do. The cul-de-sac is poured. I saw a copy of the as-built, so if we're not there, we are very close.
Okay, we can expect a completed punch list by next month then?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, you know, if we have any punch lists at all, we'll get that to them
Okay.
shortly.
Well, if there is anything left, you guys will complete it by next month?
Absolutely,
Very good.
absolutely.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes, sir. This is really to Mr. Carroll and maybe our legal counsel. I keep looking at these dollar amounts on these performance obligations, and I'm quite concerned that the low dollar amounts on these. I don't think that you could have built the cul-de-sac on either one of these for $5,000, and that's what the warranty or performance obligation is. Who sets these, and is this by council ordinance, or does it need to be updated, or, you know, are these old figures, or what?
A lot of your performance obligation amounts are based on ordinance, where so many feet of roadway based on type of surface, there's a dollar amount set by ordinance. Some things where there is no item set by ordinance, we get together with the engineer for that project and work out an amount and put it in place, but, you know, some of the old ordinance set amounts probably do need to be updated.
Okay, could I ask that you get with council and look at these and let's get them updated? I mean, you know, if we ever have to call one of these, which thank goodness we haven't since I've been sitting on this, but if we ever have to, we need to have the ability to complete whatever the engineers and contractors have not completed. Otherwise,
agree.
the parish is gonna be holding them back.
We just, Mr. Doherty, the council with engineering just recently updated those ordinances. So we understand that there were some issues there, and we did address that, and the council did update them.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion? Which is the motion to extend? I have a motion to extend. I have a second by Mr. Matthews. Any discussion? Please vote on the motion. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next page. Second item is the Village of Normandy Oaks Phase 1 Subdivision, Ward 1, District 1, the amount of $13,300 that expires April 25th of 2012. The debtor is Allstate Financial, and it's in Mr. Dean's district. Any opposition? Staff?
The above referenced performance obligation expires April 25th, 2012, and is scheduled for review by the Planning Commission at the March 13th, 2012 meeting. The work covered by this obligation has not been accomplished. The following uncompleted item exists. Apply the final 2 inches of asphalt to roadway. The performance obligation was established by the Planning Commission on the October 11th, 2012. The developer petitioner will be advised that he will be required to conform with all current ordinances when applicable as a condition of this extension. The developer or petitioner has been notified by the Department of Engineering on February 20, 2012 to submit a letter explaining in detail why an extension of time is needed for this obligation. Therefore, it is recommended that the performance obligation be extended for a period of 6 months or until work is satisfactorily accomplished. No response letter was received.
Is the petitioner the representative here? Okay, Mr. Matthews.
Well, what are we gonna do now? We've asked them to come before us, we've sent them a letter.
Wait a
And
minute, Mr.
do we have
Marone.
a representative?
Sorry, Mr. Matthews.
Is this Village of Normandy Oaks?
I represent the Wayner family with
Okay.
regards to Normandy Oaks. On this particular item, it has been the practice of the Wayners with regards to Normandy Oaks and with their other subdivisions that they wait to put the last layer of asphalt after all the other construction is completed because it tends to hold better and not to wear and tear through the construction process. And I believe that's what the why this issue has not yet been resolved.
Is that in phase one? They haven't put the second 2 inches of asphalt in any of Normandy Oaks? Is that the deal?
That's well, I don't know about I'm not exactly sure about the remaining subdivision, but I do know from handling other cases that has been their practice, and then once that phase is built out, then they do come back in with that last 2 inches.
Well, phase one has pretty much been built out, I think, since that's the first phase of Normandy Oaks, and we're probably on, what, phase 5 or 6 now of Normandy Oaks?
Well,
The Villages is correct me if I'm wrong, Villages is what was just completed. Those first 3 or 4 phases was just Normandy Oaks. The Villages of Normandy Oaks was what, if you'll recall, maybe last year we punched through and we did the A4A subdivision, A4A zoning. And that's what the Villages is, I believe.
yeah, you had phases, I believe, 1 through 5 for the original Normandy Oaks, and that is what they did there, is they laid 2 inches of asphalt, and then later on came and laid the second 2 inches of asphalt. This is in part of what was to be phases 6 through 10.
Okay, so this is the most recent
So
part,
this is the
Yeah,
most
this is
not
the
phase
phase
one.
completed.
Right. This
Okay.
is the new
Okay.
part.
Okay.
Motion to extend. Mr. Davis.
I have one question.
Yes.
Paul. So just is it an approximate time in which this will be completed? Do you have an idea of it from the way
I
the family
don't.
about that?
I would be speculating. I don't know exactly where they are with it, but that's certainly something that I don't mind talking with Mr. Weiner about and providing a letter back to your staff and to the commission.
I think since the performance obligation was done in October 2011, I mean, it's really not that, so I'll make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to extend. I have a second. Any discussion? Please vote on the motion.
Thank you.
Motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, Alton subdivision, 13th Street Extension, Ward 8, District 14, the amount of $5,000. It expires May 30th of 2012. The debtor is the East St. Tammany Habitat for Humanity, and it's in Mr. T.J. Smith's district. Any opposition? Staff?
The above referenced performance obligation expires May 30th, 2012, and is scheduled for review by the Planning Commission at the March 13th meeting. The work covered by the performance obligation has not been accomplished. Attached is a copy of the 90-day notice to the developer from the Department of Finance. Therefore, it is recommended that the performance obligation in the amount of $5,000 not be released at this time and to be reviewed at the April 10th, 2012 meeting.
Petitioner is representative here. Okay. Mr. Matthews.
When was this obligation established for the first time? Do we know? I don't see it on here. I may have missed it.
I believe it's November 30th, 2007, if you go to the next page in the packet.
Okay. I'm still not seeing that. Maybe I'm missing it.
That's when the letter was sent out on March the 12th, huh?
I don't have that letter. I'm missing a letter. Okay. That would explain part of that. You got the letter. He got the letter. We didn't get the letter. Okay. Okay. We have not asked them to appear before us? Is that correct? Or send a letter?
I don't see where we have yet. This is a 90-day notice.
Okay, well, I think this one clearly needs to have them, to send them a letter asking for a detailed explanation and/or an appearance, because this is quite old. And again, obviously, we can't do anything for $5,000. Cost almost that much to send a letter out, doesn't it?
Okay, you'll send that letter. Jimmy, any other
Yeah,
comment?
just one other question here. So this, when it says the work covered by the performance obligation, it's purely just the street extension? Is that why it wasn't quoted here, exactly what the work, what the work that wasn't covered? Why it wasn't stated?
I think they overlaid the street.
I'm not certain.
Okay, because I'm not certain exactly what the work wasn't being accomplished. Was it the entire street extension? I'm just saying is, where the previous ones.
Provide us with a detailed
Yeah,
explanation. and
provide
that's
us,
once we
because there's a
move on.
couple of them coming up that actually are the same way. It just says the work covered by the performance obligation has not been accomplished, but it doesn't state what work. So I would appreciate it, maybe next time we just have, like little bullets or something to know exactly, because, if it's a 3,000-foot extension, $5,000 may be tough.
Okay. We're gonna go to, minor subdivision,
Wait,
MS
do we
12.
need a motion to extend?
I'm sorry?
I think we need a motion to extend.
I don't think there was any action required on those. It says no action, it's just a 60-day notice.
Oh, okay.
But they're gonna send a notice per your request, and then I know Paul heard Jimmy to now on give us a detailed explanation of what work has not been accomplished, and just set a saying that the work has not been accomplished. Thank y'all. MS 12-02-004, an 11.31 acre parcel into parcels X and Y, Ward 3, District 3. The owner is the Reverend Alfred N. Young Jr., the surveyor is Fonchaberta Surveyors, and it's in Mr. Thompson's district. Any opposition? Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item had to be pulled from the consent calendar due to the fact that the owner of the property needs two waivers. So one would be the fact that the property is being accessed via private drive, which requires a public hearing. Any waiver of the lot frontage requirement is required. The property is owned A1A, which requires typically a 200-foot road frontage. The owner is proposing to create two parcels from one parent parcel. And since the private drive will only provide access to one parcel within the minor subdivision, said drive is not required to be built to a parish standard pursuant to Section 40-045.01, minimum standards for a private drive of subdivision ordinance, regulatory ordinance 499. Furthermore, the minimum frontage required in an A1A zoning is 200 feet. The parent parcel only has 100 foot of frontage. However, it should be noted that the parcel is an existing parcel of record, and therefore the owner has no control over the lot frontage. If the Planning Commission decides to approve this request, a waiver of the regulations is required, whereby a 2/3 majority vote of the full membership of the commission, 8 members, is required pursuant to Section 40-100 waiver of regulations of Ordinance 499. I should also note that if you notice on the survey also is attached, because of the size of the property, it does expand out and open up to a very large size lot. It's just that frontage issue that they have, the constriction there.
Mr. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Lombard. Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm. I represent Reverend Alfred N. Young Jr. And also his son, Nathan Young, who, of course, the owners and petitioners in this matter. I think the two-parcel configuration should not be a problem as it relates to what the minor subdivision ordinance envisions. Certainly a private drive, because we're only accessing a second lot, should work as well. And again, as staff has explained to you, there's obviously only 100 feet of frontage. So that's a waiver item, and we would appreciate, I'm thankful that 8 of you are here this evening, and we would appreciate all 8 of you considering granting that waiver. This is intended to be a family compound. Father to build a home on one site, son to build a home on the second site, and for them to share a common drive. In order to do that and have title in 2 names, we had to create a minor subdivision, and this will provide for access to each parcel.
Okay, let me turn it over. Mr. Willie?
Mr. Shane, this was all just one parcel at one time?
Yes, sir.
And it's being divided between X and Y?
Correct.
Okay, what I'm looking at, it looks like, so the 100-foot right-of-way is only on parcel X? So they granting a right-of-way to parcel Y?
Yes, sir.
Will that be a part of that restriction or something, whatever? Because
Yes, sir.
suppose X is sold, I'm thinking about later down the road, you got a landlocked piece of property there.
No, definitely. The plat, of course, shows the 35-foot servitude of passage, and there will be a servitude document that will provide access to that parcel so that it will be perpetual.
Okay, because if not, they can move that property line over and it become part of that right-of-way or something.
Sure.
Mr. Matthews?
Mr. Chairman, again, concerning that right-of-way, I understand that will become part of the subdivision of the 2 lots and will be of record on Lot X. But what about the maintenance of it? Will there be any obligation that they will share the maintenance or something? Because if Lot X is ultimately sold, they can say, yeah, you have the right-of-way, but I'm not going to maintain it.
Right. Well, I'm not sure
Well,
that...
let me interject here.
All right.
There's no maintenance requirement when you just access one lot with a private drive. The maintenance agreement per code kicks in when you service 2 lots or more. When it's just one, it's not required.
Well, it is 2 lots, isn't it?
No, I'm sorry, when a private drive
Access.
accesses just more than 1 lot, it's required. But this case, the private drive is only accessing 1 lot. Therefore, a construction standard's not required.
Okay, it's only accessing which lot, X or Y?
Why?
Why?
X has frontage on Penn Mill Road.
Yeah, the
Why
one
doesn't
lot has the frontage on the public road, the other one's servicing with a private drive. And then the ordinance kicks in for maintenance when it's 2 lots or more that services a private drive.
The ordinance doesn't kick in, but there could be a squabble between the two parties. That's what I'm concerned about too.
Bill, I guess a couple of things. Really haven't thought through what the servitude agreement will say. It probably will address maintenance, but if not, the civil code addresses the rights and
not an issue we
obligations
have to
of
deal with
parties that
anyway.
would share a common drive unless council disagrees. I mean, in the civil context, between the two parties, even absent an agreement, there will be obligations between the parties as it relates to joint use and joint maintenance.
I'm
But-
just trying to think through and maybe alleviate a problem before it gets there.
Right. My guess is
We
that.
could alleviate it if we had jurisdiction, but we don't.
Well, that's why
And
I'm
I'll
just
ask
asking.
staff,
That's why,
our
no, that's
attorney.
why I'm asking, not as the council demanding, pointing it out that's a problem that they might like to consider.
Sure.
I'll ask our legal counsel.
Well, it's really an issue between the 2 lot owners and would be addressed by the civil code. So it's not something that we need to address.
I understand and agree. That's why I was making it a request on my part for the 2 lot owners to consider this when they did this, that's all.
We'll take that into consideration. Point well made, and we'll take that.
I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion, I have a second. Please vote on the motion. I need everybody to vote if they're gonna waive. 1, 2, 3. Motion carries. That's the end of the consent calendar. Revocation 12-02-002. It's a revocation of a portion of 19th Avenue and East Street in Ward 3, District 5. The applicant is Mikado and Rigagor LLC. The surveyor is Calfana Engineering Incorporated. It's in Mr. Gould's district. Any objection? Staff?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, if you recall, this case was tabled at last month's meeting pending Mr. Gould's review of this case. If you'd like me to go ahead and read the staff report again, I'll do that. The applicant owns property on all sides of the proposed streets to be revocated and wishes to purchase the properties in order to assimilate said streets into his surrounding property to be utilized for commercial application. The staff has reviewed the applicant's request and believes the proposal is consistent relative to the Louisiana Revised Statutes governing the revocation of movable property, since the right-of-way does not appear to serve any public use or benefit other than to the applicant. Therefore, the staff has no objections to the proposed revocation request.
Mr. Scalfano.
David Scalfano with Scalfano Engineer. I'm here to answer any questions, and the developer is here if it's needed. He can come up to.
Mr. Matthews.
At the last meeting, there was some concern about the possibility of some future use of this roadway that had not been anticipated by the developer, but the council had some thoughts of maybe doing some other things, and I understand that they have, the council member has met with the developer, and they have cleared any problems, and I move to accept.
A motion, I have a second. Any discussion? Please vote on the motion. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Preliminary subdivision review, SD 08-05-006, Phase 6, Clipper Estates. It's resubmitted, Ward 9, District 13. The developer and owner is Clipper Land Holding LLC. The engineer is Richard C. Lambert Consultants LLC, and it's in Mr. Richard Ortigue's district. Any opposition? Staff?
Department of Engineering, the preliminary plans and hydrologic study have been reviewed by this office and inspections made of the site. It is recommended that preliminary submittal be approved subject to the following. The dedication statement should be corrected to indicate that this is a private subdivision. The signature line, Parish Engineer, should be changed to Director of Department of Engineering. No maintenance obligation is required. Since this is an extension of a private subdivision, no mandatory developmental fee is required at final submittal. In accordance with obligation 499, since this subdivision has a prior voluntary developmental agreement. Department of Environmental Services and Planning have no comments.
It's a petition of the representative here. Petition or representative for Clipper? Okay. Turn it over to the commissioners. Mr. Matthews?
I've got just a couple of questions because I don't think I understand some of this. On the restrictive covenants, number 12, I'm not sure I understand that first sentence exactly what that means. Can you all explain that, or can someone explain that? All lots in the front within the green belt area is subject to the planting of 3 Class A trees prior to receiving an occupancy. Exactly which lots are in the front in the green belt? It looks like there's a green belt that goes all the way around it.
That's right. This is an old subdivision, and this isn't, like I said, this is a further phase of, I think, of this subdivision. And early on, when the subdivision was first developed, we required them to put in this green belt. And each individual owner of their lot, when they file for building permits, is required to plant these 3 Class A trees in that front buffer.
Okay. That didn't make that sense to me, but if that's the sense of what that means, okay. And it looks like lots 24 through 30 have extremely small frontage. Will that interfere with the driveways, creating driveways in these?
20 feet.
I mean, they're lots 24 through 30 have exceptionally small. I don't know how big are they? Can you tell?
20
Are they
feet.
20 foot?
40 by 140.
19.8? Okay, is that what they all are? All right, I see that. Is that big enough to put a driveway and all in?
It should be. The driveways are probably going to be butting up to each other at the edge, but it should be.
So basically have one big driveway?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
It's similar to their patio or garden homes back there.
that's what they are.
okay.
And generally, the two driveways butt up to each other with a little common space between them.
Just unusual.
I've seen.
Move to accept if we have.
Second.
A motion to approve, I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote on the motion. Motion carries. SD 07-10-017, Phase 2B Alpha Industrial Park, Phase 2B, Ward 4, District 5. The developer and the owner is Alpha Industrial Park LLC. The engineer is Rosselli Engineering Consulting. It's in Mr. Gould's district. Any opposition? Staff, your comments.
Department of Engineering, the preliminary plans and hydrologic study have been reviewed by this office and inspections made at the site. It is recommended that preliminary submittal be approved. A funded maintenance obligation in the amount of $15,000 is required in accordance with Subdivision Ordinance 499, Section 406108, funded letters of credit for existing parish roads to ensure that the repair of any damage to parish roads resulting from construction activity in connection with this subdivision. Mandatory developmental fees will be required at final submittal in accordance with Ordinance 499 since no public hearing was held prior to January 1st, 2005. Department of Environmental Services and Planning have no comments.
Petition or the representative here? Yes, sir. Come on up and introduce yourself.
I'm Jeremy Piguata with Resilier Engineering, representing Alpha Industrial LLC.
Any question, anything to add to the comments that have been read?
Not at this time.
Let me see if there's any questions for you. Mr. Davis?
It's been a long time since tentative.
Yes,
Huh?
yes.
I mean, you're all gonna really start going with the
Yes.
process now?
That's correct.
You ready to go? I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Matthews for discussion.
Just a couple of questions, one for clarification. At the bottom, or the south side, I guess, of the plat, it shows kind of a triangular area. I can't tell, is that part of the detention pond or what?
Yes, it is. In between the, it's a drainage ditch that goes out, and in between the development in that ditch is a detention pond.
Okay, so on both sides of that ditch is detention pond?
Correct.
Okay. And the end of Alpha Boulevard is Alpha Boulevard going to be extended further at some future time, or what? Do we need a temporary turnaround here, or what?
As it's proposed right now that we have a turnaround to be at the end of lot 15 and 14. Currently we have a turnaround that is in lot 18 and lot 11 that is currently has an obligation on, and that's about to be extended the additional 6 lots. And the other side was originally supposed to be phase 1. However, the owners of that property had decided not to more or less go forward at a time that the other owners decided they wanted to go forward as well. So we have a turnaround that's going to be proposed at 15 and 14 with a possible, well, an expected extension into the new development.
Okay, and we will see the actual turnaround in final? Is that how we do that?
Yes, it'll be set up as a temporary aggregate turnaround until the connection is made. If not, then it would be required to be a permanent turnaround.
Okay, but we don't see that, is it correct? Now, we don't see the actual building of a layout for the turnaround till final?
Well, if they're going to make a permanent turnaround, they would submit something to get approved by us before they construct it, and then they would construct it, depending on how far the road's gonna go.
Right.
We would
we'd go ahead and submit the turnaround as being a permanent. However, we would request it to be a temporary at that time until the connection's made, but we would be obligated for a permanent turnaround as per the ordinance.
If they don't submit it now, then how do we ever know it gets built? I mean, does anybody check that? When is that checked?
Well, before they submit the as-built, they have to straighten all that out, whether they're gonna have a temporary turnaround or a permanent turnaround at what location. If they try to submit a final as-built, then we would know something's wrong if they hadn't done that already.
Correct.
But shouldn't we see the plan for that, rather than just showing it at the final as-built? Because we don't see the as-built, do we?
No, generally don't see the as-built.
At final, we need to see it, but.
We should see that at final then, is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
you would see
okay.
that at final.
All right, that's fine, that's what I needed to know. Move to approve.
Mr. Mackey.
I have a question for engineering. The drainage comes down and goes to that ditch, and then it goes into the pond, and then it exits the pond, this here drainage. And I guess it goes down this ditch here, that's this ditch going this direction. I don't know where that goes. It's probably picking up a lot of water along the way, though.
Yeah, it goes up here, then I think it goes through the lower part of Tammany Hills, or maybe just to the south of Tammany Hills. I can't remember exactly where that runs. It floods. Yeah, this is like right by the cemetery, right here, at the edge of the page.
I'm just worrying about the cumulative flow, you know, in this little ditch. I guess the engineer is, you
Yeah,
know.
they're required not to increase flow in it, obviously.
Right, so. You have that drainage under control, sir?
Yes, sir, I do. It's in the original hydro analysis report that we provide in order to get prelim approval. It addresses all the concern for drainage.
All the way going up to the cemetery on?
Not past this phase 2B. Right now, the original was sent as, it was originally supposed to be just phase 2, that the whole hydro analysis was supposed to be for. However, that was split to 2A, 2B. The other owners have approached us as far as collaborating with any type of overall drainage design at that point. So we're really not submitting on their behalf if drainage is going to work for them. They more likely have to have an entire different system.
Your plan will include what you're putting in when they come in for analysis, for the permit, they'll have to satisfy all the requirements.
That's correct.
He's only responsible for
yeah.
his part of the drainage that's going there.
Yeah, either way, it would have to work and abide by the ordinances, either way.
Okay,
I have a
they-
motion and
I'll
I have a
second it.
second. Please vote on the motion. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Old business, entering the parish right-of-way resolution number 11-009, wards 4, 6, District 6 and 7, in the amount of $130,000. It expires March the 10th of 2012. The debtor is Tri-State NGL Pipeline LLC, and it's in Mr. Richard Tanner's and Mr. Gorby's district. Any opposition? Staff?
This is to advise that St. Tammany Parish, this is to advise the St. Tammany Parish Planning Commission approve the extension of the $130,000 performance obligation for an additional 6 months. However, the Planning Commission directed this office to notify you that a more detailed explanation of why this project wasn't completed within the originally authorized 6 months period is required. Your reply must be furnished to the Planning Commission at the next scheduled meeting of March 13th, 2012. Therefore, your letter of explanation must reach this office no later than March 1st, 2012, for it to be on the March 13th, 2012 agenda. No reply was received.
Mr. Matthews, before you put your light on, I know you inquired about this.
This is one of those problems. What do we do now? Do we call the performance obligation?
Well,
I don't
all they're
think we
doing
wanna
is
put-
entering the, I know they're putting that pipeline in.
I've had a lot of experience with this. I've been going out looking at that pipeline in
Yeah.
District 7. If you go up 434 and just take a left, basically anywhere above I-12, you'll run into it. So it's a massive amount of construction being done right here. I don't necessarily think there's a problem with extending another 6 months. They're just not finished completing, obviously with the weather and the swamp. It's basically swamps out there too. But they're doing a really good job of hiding this thing and everything, so I'll make a motion to approve the extension.
Okay. Mr. Matthews.
Well, the problem is, they have just ignore us. I mean, this one may well be one that's working fine and all, but the problem is, what do we do? Our hands would be tied if clearly $130,000, while it's a lot of money, would not be sufficient to complete the project.
If they don't complete the project, we don't have an issue. The people on the other end of the pipeline has the issue, and the people on the beginning of it has an issue.
Well, no, I understand.
We get $130,000 and we don't have to do anything.
But what do we do as a commission? I mean, do we just send them another letter and keep sending them letters till, we run out of paper, or what?
The $130,000 is only at the locations where they're crossing in our right-of-way, not the entire pipeline. That's why it's that small of an amount. And I'm certain we don't want to take on that project ourselves, laying pipe under our roads for a gas pipeline.
I'm sure we don't. But what do we do if these people don't finish, or they don't finish correctly? It looks like this one's gonna finish, but this is just emphasizes the problem we have with doing these things. We've got to fix it, and hopefully, Neil, the council has addressed this, but this is a problem.
Mr. Chairman, if I make no mistake, the majority of this thing is already completed anyway. Through St. Tammany
I think
Parish.
the issue boils down to that we made a request for them to come and explain why they needed the extension, and they just ignored us.
Yeah.
Can I make
So,
can I
now-
make a recommendation to, do we send these guys certified letters?
I'm not certain.
I would go ahead and request you send a certified letter,
And
have it
I don't
signed.
know if legally you can just go ahead and take the $130,000 for not answering your letter.
I wouldn't think so.
And I'll let legal answer that.
Well, the answer is you can't. But the motion that was made and seconded to extend it is the appropriate thing to do. We don't know what the ramifications would be of any other action other than to do that. And considering the nature of this type of project, I wouldn't advise legally that we do anything other than to extend it. However, I will get with Paul and find out what the status is of the project as it relates to this bond and our right-of-way. If they're completed the project outside of our right-of-way, then I don't think there's a real need to find out any more than that, since that's what the bond is for. If that's not the case, then I will seriously consider sending them a legal notice, telling them that we want an answer as to what's going on with the project.
But again, Neil, our problem is we do these obligations and we know full well that we cannot, as a practical matter, do very much about it. Why do we bother?
Well, that's a question that's properly addressed by the guys that write the ordinances. When you say there's not much you can do about it, it's a balancing thing. So what your options are in terms of what you can do about it versus not taking that action is the real question. You know, anytime you get into a situation where you're asked to consider calling a performance obligation, there's various considerations that you have to give to that. Number one, you know, is that sufficient for us to complete the project? Do we have the wherewithal to do it? Do we want to do it? Is it within our capabilities? All those questions are there, and of course, you're not equipped to answer those questions. That's more of an expertise that lies with engineering, public works, and the administration, okay? As to any other options, there may be other options. There may be potential injunctive relief in addition to calling the performance obligations, but typically, we don't get to that point. Now, the last time that we had an issue with one of these types of cases, I did send a letter, and we did get the response, and we did get the action that we wanted. So we have to take it in increments and do the least problematic step in the beginning, and that is, I'll get with Paul, we'll send him another more official notice, if you will, and see what happens. It gives us an opportunity to weigh our options, and if we don't get the response, then we can look at what other options are available. There are other options, but they're not necessarily options that we should be discussing at a public hearing to tell that person what our options are and what we may or may not do. It's best just to go ahead and send the official request and see if we get the response. And then we'll weigh whatever other options, and the weighing of those options may very well be weighing them between the legal department, the administration, public works, and those types of things. But we'll get there.
Well, it appears our position is our hands are pretty much tied. All we can do as the commission is keep extending this and ask somebody else in the administration to do something. Is that really kind of correct? I mean,
Sure, because, you know, you're the first step in the process, so to speak. This is put on your agenda for your review and consideration, and you're requesting that somebody report to you and tell you what the status is entirely appropriate. But then it kind of switches over to who directs the parish forces, and can we afford to do this option versus this option versus that option. You guys don't make that decision, but you're the first step on that ladder. And so you're taking the appropriate step, you're doing what you're called upon to do, and then it falls on the next level.
okay, so we don't merely, at this point, just extend it. We extend it with the request from somebody above us, i.e. engineering, legal, whoever, to take the next step as necessary.
That's what we're doing.
And that's what we then need to do, not just rubber stamp it
That's
and
right.
extend it, but we extend it with that caveat, please take the next action.
That's right. The last time you requested that, legal did get with engineering, and we did take that step, and we did get some results that we wanted. And so, you know, it's not something to take lightly. We shouldn't do it just as due course, but do it because it is, in fact, a problematic situation, and we need to address it. and that's what you're doing in this case, and we'll do that. And then we'll see what the next step, if any, has to be taken.
Do we need to make that part of our motion, or what?
I got the message.
Okay.
As soon as you said it.
Yeah.
I got it the last time without a formal request. We stay on top of it.
I think in all fairness to the construction company who's building the pipeline, we don't even know if they received this letter from us. So, you know, granting them another 6-month extension and having certified mail to verify that we get response from that, plus you're gonna be able to talk to engineering, is the right thing to do.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote on that motion. Motion carries. Any new business? Any old business? Just a note, for the people who don't know that Mr. Anthony Goff has passed away in February. There was no notice that I saw in the Times-Picayune. They told me it was, in one of the local newspapers in Slidell. Our sincere and heartfelt goes out to his family and his friends and all, and he'll be greatly missed. He was a wonderful gentleman and a great member of this commission, so just to let y'all know.
At our next commission meeting, I would suggest and request we have a moment of silence in his memory.
Sure.
At the beginning.
You can we'll take care of that right after the invocation and the
Okay.
pledge. I'll
Very
let you
good.
do that. Thank y'all. Any other business? Motion to adjourn.